So, um, welcome this morning. Thank you for showing up on a Saturday morning to share with Laura and myself. Today, we're going to be talking about getting started on your dissertation. So, my name is Alberto Garcia. I'm the Academic Skills Librarian, and I'm joined this morning by Laura Jeffrey, our librarian and research skills specialist. So, just a bit of an overview of the session, how we're going to proceed. We're going to talk briefly about basically the structure of a dissertation. Then we will talk about time management. How do you manage a large research project? We will then think about literature reviews and thinking about some of the things that they do, what they're for. Then we'll talk about actually the act of literature searching. And then if we have time at the end, for those who like to say, I'm going to give a demonstration on reference management. I'll be using Zotero, and then we'll have a Q&A if we have some time. Okay. So, dissertation process. Just a quick note. So, what are we going to do today? So, usually when we think about dissertation process, what we can do in the library is we can help you with those skills that underpin the process. These ideas of literature searching, literature reviewing, reference management. But for the more specific stuff, like the information about proposals, titles, abstracts, the content, and the style of the writing, this is the place where you want to look at towards your department there. But with that in mind, I think we can basically think about what are some of the key sections that you are planning to include in your dissertation or in your large research project? And it'd be really great if we could maybe put some of these answers in the chat so we can see basically what are some of the similarities and differences. We've got some typing, so we'll wait for those. Very nice. So we've got basically a literature review, qualitative analysis coming through, ethnographic insights. Got some more answers coming. Yes, research methods, intro chapters, conclusions. We've got a really nice long list here of research methods, analysis, discussion, conclusion, possibly recommendations. Yes. Let's wait for a few more. I think that's really quite nice because we're seeing some of the things that are overlapping. Just wait for one more to come through. Yes, document analysis and also literature review. Yes, so I think this is quite nice. So, I mean, thinking about basically these type of overlaps and from different fields, we can maybe look at a type of master list, and this is a thing that might appear across various types of thesis and dissertations from different fields. So, yes, abstract, that was shown, a title, contents, table of contents, introduction, literature review, methodology, perhaps the results, discussion, conclusions. Anybody think about appendices as well? Just in case you need to add some further information, references. So I think this is quite nice about this type of master list and how we kind of, even though we're in different fields, we have the similar type of structure in terms of how we present our information and present our research here. So it's also helpful to think about maybe we look at some model structures as well. So if you're in the humanities field, how might a dissertation look like? And we've given here a model structure of, okay, maybe you have an abstract, you have an introduction where you introduce basically background theory and setting the context for the research. And maybe that takes up about 10 to 15% of your word count. Then the body sections where maybe you divide it by a type of thematic analysis, or maybe you're looking at information in a chronological order. broader, or perhaps you're looking at case studies and you're really explicating those type of things. Then conclusions, bibliography, and appendices. And perhaps then if we went over to the social sciences or the hard sciences, we see a somewhat similar but also very different structure here. And maybe this is kind of working a bit more in the type of lab report model, where, okay, yes, you have an abstract, you have an introduction, you have a literature review, a methodology, results, discussions, conclusions. And again, you can see the different types of percentages that might be breaking down for each section for your word count there. You can notice that between sciences, social sciences, and humanities, perhaps there's a little bit more fluidity in the structure for humanities, but essentially we're still trying to kind of express this information in a very structured way here. So one thing that I always kind of think about it, and I think it's helpful, is to think about basically a structure in a bit like an hourglass model here. And I know I've referenced this in terms of like your academic writing as well, but also, I mean, it's a larger research project. How are you kind of coming into this information? How are you expressing this information for your reader? So if you think about the hourglass in this very wide sense, maybe the first couple of sections are basically your introduction, your background, you're giving that context, and you're helping your reader orient your reader by a literature review. What are the issues that are important there? And then when you kind of get more towards that middle section, you're really going to be focusing on the methodology, the results, and your own analysis of the information there. And then coming back outwards, maybe in the conclusions, you're thinking about, okay, discussions, the limitations, and the implications perhaps for further research there. So in thinking about then the structure of your research project, it's important to keep in mind what is the key point that you're trying to bring across in your research. And I always like to say academic writing is not a mystery novel. It's not a mystery story. We shouldn't wait till the very end to say, aha, that's why I'm reading this project and that's why I'm reading this essay. It should be very up close in the front. And you have to think about then, what is this type of connecting thread that runs through your project to help your reader, orient your reader for that. And for most projects, this thread is going to be the contribution that your study is making. So how does that kind of work out then? If we look at it in your introduction, you're helping your reader to see what the contribution is of your research project and why that's important. In the literature review, how does the contribution fit into the current state of the field? In the methods and analysis, what's the evidence or data that will help you provide and explore the contribution that you proposed? In the discussion, then you're interpreting the evidence to inform basically this contribution that you've told your reader. And in the conclusion, you might think that based on the contribution, what happens next? What are the implications, the recommendations, and what might be some of the next steps for further research here? And it's at this point, I think that it's helpful to talk a little bit about research gap, and some of you may have heard about this term. And it's important to say, okay, what is it? What is it? What is a research gap? And often it's a problem that's not been addressed or answered in previous studies. It's often that central impetus of why you start to think about the contribution and think about how your research project could contribute to the literature and to the state of knowledge in your field. And the wonderful thing is that it can also lead to new findings. Perhaps you're adding to the conversation, or it's something that's looking forward and say, okay, this now, with this in mind, maybe this is the type of project for a PhD. So who knows? But also, then how do we kind of identify a research gap? And one thing that we can do is find inspiration from the literature. And I think here, perhaps reading other literature reviews is a great sense of not only seeing how literature reviews are modeled in their structure, but also getting a sense of what's the current state of knowledge in your field. What are some of the key themes that other scholars are pointing out there? You often in papers or in projects, the suggestions for further research basically are often good points to see, okay, so what based off this, what was meant or what could be studied further. Also mapping the literature, so seeing what's out there as well. So some of the things that we'll be talking about in these next sections of basically literature searching and gathering information, just really seeing out what's out there. Then you want to ask questions. So what's the significance of this work to my own broader field as you're reading literature? Does the argument require more clarification? of a certain writer? What are the issues that haven't been addressed? So as you start reading through this information, these are questions you should be asking. Are there any other perspectives on this topic that can be considered? Why or why not? And then when was the research conducted? And I think that's really important because, in a certain sense, depending when it was conducted, certain technology might not have been available. Certain theories may have changed since then. So just having all this in mind as you're doing the research for your own project can really kind of help you to basically think about this research gap. So the nice thing is, I said, the topics that we're going to cover in the next sections are going to be really critical to helping you kind of plan your research and also discover where this gap might be. So with that, I will hand over to Laura here in terms of time management.
Great, thanks very much, Alberto. Shall I share my screen? Is that better, or do you want me just to wave? You need to advance the slide.
Should I? Yeah, I can stop sharing and yeah, you can present and yeah.
Okay, I'll present. Yeah, thanks. There we go. So I will just skip ahead.
Ooh.
Does that work? Is it moving?
Yes, that's gone. Yeah.
Brilliant. Fab. Okay. Yeah. So as Alberto said, yes, a large part of keeping on top of this project isn't actually even the project itself. It's kind of how you approach it. And that is very much a mindset. Obviously, all of you will have developed lots of time management strategies for coping with your program at the moment. So whether if you're doing a PhD, that would have been the kind of these early stages of the project. If you're doing a master's, it might be quite different time management because you might have taught elements. And so in that sense, more materials being given to you, you're having to do slightly less in terms of organizing your own time. And I think it might even be possible we've got an undergraduate today. And so all of you will have very, very different strategies. And when you start your dissertation or thesis, again, it's going to vary massively because you might be having to juggle it alongside taught elements. If you're doing your PhD, possibly you're able to focus entirely on that project, but there's loads of other things that come into conflict with that, just in terms of daily life and keeping on top of managing things alongside a project. And the kind of timescales that you're working on will obviously vary massively. If you're doing a master's, you'll just perhaps have a few months in which to do your research project. I know we've got some 9-month masters who are really the whole year is a research project, but obviously at PhD, you've got many, many years. So all of this is kind of very generic advice. And if you just want to talk through your own specific context, please then do come and see us one-to-one. But I'll present some of these general ideas in the first place, and it'd be really useful to get your feedback on whether or not they apply to your particular context. So I think, yeah, one of the big issues is when you're working on a big project, you're not necessarily doing it every day. Like I said, there's loads of other factors that kind of come into conflict with it. So you need to kind of keep on top of where you're up to and where your thinking is. And I think that's a large part of time management, is not losing time, getting back up to speed again. Because there are some things that do just take ages, and in that sense, time management can't magic extra hours for you. But what it can do is mean that you're really prepared, you know where you're going on this journey, you know how far you've got, and you know where you want to go next. And I think however you do that, whether it's kind of calendarizing, whether it's diaryizing, whatever it is, it means that you kind of feel confident when you sit down to do some work on this project, that you know exactly what you're going to be doing on that particular day. I think, as Alberto said, writing shouldn't be a surprise, and equally, your dissertation hopefully shouldn't be too much of a surprise either. So taking a little bit of time at the start to imagine where this project might be going can save you some time in the future. Just getting that big picture, and that's something that we've talked about if any of you have been to any of the time management sessions before. There's all these different scales on which we manage time, one of which is that kind of termly or yearly or 3-yearly overview. Where are going to be the pinch points? Where are your deadlines? Where have you got flexibility to actually work on this project? What you don't want to do is find yourself constantly getting behind because you couldn't even imagine what was coming in the next week or the next fortnight. This is something I go on and on about, but it's so important to kind of be really specific in these tasks. So we'll look at a few kind of strategies for breaking down these tasks. Because when Alberto presented the kind of sections you might have in your thesis, it seems like really straightforward. Oh, I might just have, 5 or 6 sections. That's really nice. That's 5 or 6 bits of work. As you well know, there's so much kind of preparation in order for you to be able to get to that point where you can actually write that particular section. Yeah, like I said, you want to kind of keep records as you go through, and that will vary. Some of you I know are really kind of what I would say analog. You like pens and notepads and big flip chart paper and post-it notes, and that's absolutely fine. Some of you are much more digital and you'll prefer to kind of have a few apps to keep you going. So we'll look at a couple of different strategies for that as well. So as I've said before, this time management isn't just a to-do list, particularly when you're dealing with a massive project. Can you imagine how long it would be if you just wrote down absolutely everything you had to do to get from the point where you are now to the point where you're submitting that thesis? It would just go on and on and on, and you wouldn't know what to do first. You wouldn't know really when you'd achieve some of these things because they might be massive, like write chapter 3, and you think absolutely everything that you would have to do to get to that point. So you need to be really, really specific about what it is that you want to achieve. You need to think about how you're going to do that. So think about, what resource you need to get you into a position where you can tick something off that list. Like we've said before, be able to prioritize when are you going to do it? Is it really critical that you do it now? Is it something that's niggling in the back of your mind and you want to just spend half a day kind of getting everything written down, but knowing full well you can't really do that yet? You're not in that position, so you need to park that for later. Again, that comes into this sort of time management is also about organization, wider organization. Where are you going to put stuff? Is it going to be physically on a desk and then could it get buried? Is it a file that you've chucked in a folder that you forgot you'd even created? How are you going to remember that you've created these things? What are going to be your tools for kind of sparking those memories? And I think the last one is really important. It's often overlooked, but it's the kind of motivation. Why are you doing this? Are you doing it because it interests you? Are you doing it because it's really critical to the project? Are you doing it because your supervisor told you you should do it, but you haven't really got a clear idea of kind of how it fits into the grand scheme? So just pausing before you start something. And we've talked about this before in terms of kind of reading strategies, rather than just mindlessly searching for some articles and beginning to read at the start of the article and getting through and thinking, I don't really know how this fits, having that clear purpose. Why am I doing this? Is it because I want to get an answer to a particular question? Or is there a reason I'm undertaking this research to take me off in a new direction? Or is it to kind of keep me on track and to really clarify and focus my thoughts? But just taking that pause beforehand can save you a lot of wasted time because you're just directionless. So yeah, setting objectives. We all have these big aims. Like the mega aim is just getting the thesis or the dissertation written, and within that you'll have several other aims. But really, the objectives are the kind of key. These are the things that are going to take you to that aim. We want them to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So these are the SMART objectives that you might have heard of before. It's often used in kind of slightly more business speak, but I think it's a really useful tool to map onto the academic process as well. It just means that you know what you've got to do. It knows when you've done it because it's really measurable. It's something that you can kind of quantify and say, actually, yes, I was able to do that within those 3 hours. It's achievable. It's something where you've got all the resources in place to achieve that. It's realistic. It's that sort of thing. Yes, technically, I could write a chapter. Is it realistic? I'm going to go do it in 2 days? Possibly not. And so, again, asking yourself all these questions just saves you kind of wasting time. I've highlighted Goblin Tools here, and this is a nice little AI tool which Alberto introduced me to. And obviously it's not academic, it's not you, it's not got your kind of critical perspective, it hasn't got your departmental context or your subject specific context. But I think it's quite helpful if you're just feeling super overwhelmed by the tasks that are in front of you and you think, I don't know what I've got to do to get me to this finish line. Have a little look at it. The URL's there, and it breaks tasks down for you. So you can decide how much you want something breaking down. If it's really spicy, which is how it describes it, it means you want it really, really granular. If you just want a couple of like hints to set you in the right direction, you might make it less spicy. And this example here is, write a 4,000-word essay and look at all the tasks that it's put in place there that you would need to do to write that essay. You can then even break down those single tasks. So we broke down the conduct preliminary research, and again, it's given us like another 10 things. The idea of this isn't that it overwhelms you and you think, oh, there's way more here than I could ever fit into my time scale. It's just little prompts. Like I said, you'll be able to be critical about what it's pushing your way. But it is helpful at this early stage to make you realize there's a million little things you need to do to get you to that final point. And if some of those things are missing, that's why we then struggle in the writing process, because we're not actually ready to start. We haven't quite done enough research or thinking or reading or planning. Oh, Nikhil's just said you love Goblin tools. Yeah, and I think that's it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be about academic things, just in life, kind of all the stages. Yeah, but you can pop, plan a holiday in there. And as we all know, there's lots of stages to get you there. One question we often get is, how do I know how long something's going to take me? Sometimes I'll set aside a whole morning for doing reading and I'll just get through like one article and it's super frustrating because I've got a massive pile of books and loads of articles I wanted to get through. Depending on the timescale of your project, depends on how long you kind of have to get used to this, but you can possibly base it on your experiences so far, just thinking about how long has stuff taken you in the past. And sometimes you'll just know that. And as you go through the academic process, we get a feel for how long it takes us to read something. But if you're struggling, maybe particularly with writing, some of these bigger tasks, just keep a little diary. This could be a grid on a piece of paper, it could be an Excel spreadsheet, it could just be a Word document, a notepad file. What's your task? Again, don't just say reading, but say like reading an article or reading 6 articles or writing 500 words or whatever, and just get some baseline data. So work out what's your kind of average time for doing this sort of work. What's your worst case scenario? Because we all have bad days and you can all find a really knotty article that just takes you like a whole day to digest. And then what's your best time as well? Sometimes you might fly through stuff because perhaps you've got a really specific purpose in mind. And there's a little formula there you can do just to work out how long things will take you. You don't have to do that. That might seem a little bit too specific, but sometimes this can be helpful with some of these tasks, and it can then just help you plan your diary. How long is it going to take me to read this or to write this? I know I'm going to have to give myself a couple of weeks to get that thing written just because this is how long it takes me as an individual. And that might mean you have to squeeze other tasks. Sometimes we just have to have a cut-off point and say, that's it. I haven't got any more time to read because I know it's going to take me this long to do my writing. Anyone who's popped in to see me for a one-to-one about time management, I will have handed you these 3 planners, and this is about planning on different scales. We will show you at the end on our LibGuide. We've got various tabs, as you'll be aware, on all the different topics we're talking about today. And on the one about time management, we do have these timetables for working on dissertations specifically. So you might want the meta scale, looking, as we said, across the whole term. You might want to just plan week by week. You don't want to micromanage too much, but you can want to have a vague idea of what the things you need to achieve this week, the things that are non-negotiable, like meetings with supervisors, how much time have I actually got left. Some of you might really like to work on a kind of really minute scale and do a kind of daily plan as well. I like to do it almost like by the half hour on my diary, but I know that sometimes that can be quite stressful as well if you don't achieve things within that time frame. So I've talked a lot about this kind of record keeping, and I think this is really, really important, having some sort of research journal. So keep the notes as you go along of kind of what you're thinking, where you're up to. Sometimes you can be really in a particular area of research and then you inevitably have to move on. Something happens, you might have to go off and do field work, or your supervisor might suggest you explore another area, or if you're working on your master's, you might actually just have another essay that you've got to get in and you take this massive break. It's really important to be able to kind of re-inhabit your former self and think, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking at this time. That's why I was really focused. Otherwise, you might come back to your readings and just be a bit puzzled. And if you're doing a PhD, you might be looking back on 3 years ago, and what seemed really important to you then might seem less important in the future. So keep a record. So there's the looking back bit. There's also looking forward, see what's coming down the line. And it might be that kind of those sort of planners, that kind of micro scale, but also having a kind of whole project plan, I think is really helpful. So Gantt charts are famous for this. This gives you a really nice way of looking at all the different tasks that you've got to do and kind of when you're going to do them. And from this screenshot here, you can see, there'll be tasks that are overlapping. Very rarely can you just focus on one thing at a time. There's lots of tools out there that can help you with this, but actually on Excel, there are some really nice templates that you can just download. You can then tweak them to your own particular needs, put your own date ranges in there, and it just kind of holds you accountable. Yes, like I said, it stops there being some of those surprises around the corner. There's also lots of other bits of project management software out there as well. Trello is something that we've used in the library and that I've used as well for kind of top level planning. And there's kind of two different scales on which you can do that. So you might want to do it thematically. You might want to think in terms of writing or reading or archival research or going out into the field. What are all the big kind of top level things I want to do? Within those, you can click on them and open a little box, and you can have a to-do list within each of those. So you can keep drilling down. It keeps it kind of those objectives being really smart. You might equally want to do it week by week, particularly if you're working on a master's thesis and your time frame's a little bit more compressed. You might want to think, what are the things I know I need to get done this week? As you can see, you can tag things in different ways. You can set yourself little alerts. They come straight through to your inbox, through to your email. So it reminds you, oh yeah, I've got to do that thing. Again, it kind of separates it a little bit from a calendar, but it's about thinking about the big project as a whole. And I've listed some of the tools that I found out there. Some of you will no doubt have others. Please do share in the chat. I think this is one of the really nice things about these workshops is when someone says, actually, I've been using this other tool for, a couple of years, and they can kind of share their best practice. So yeah, kind of in-depth to-do lists. And by that, like I said, they can be quite granular, have little check boxes, have alerts set to them. Big project management tools, things like Trello, Monday, although it is a subscription service, there's a free version as well, which is perfectly good if you've just got one or two projects running at the same time. Ideas boards. So if you are a kind of post-it person, you can obviously do that physically within the space that you work. But there are some really nice online tools as well. So I've used Miro and Jamboard quite a lot. Padlet you might be aware of as well. Often these are used in online teaching sessions. And again, it's just a way of when you've got a little thought in your head, capturing it, getting it down. Padlet's really nice. You can put lots of links in there as well. You can have images in there. You can have like long columns, you can move stuff around. Again, Miro's really good for that. You can have it almost like kind of infinite board, so it can start quite tight, and then as you get a theme, you can break off and add lots more ideas in that way. And like I said, I think it's really important to keep some sort of research journal going. It can be totally private or you can share it. You'll find lots of people out there with kind of blogs or vlogs who are recording their research process. So sometimes it's useful to tap into those to help you realize, you're not the only person out there going through some of these challenges. So we've got a couple of minutes, and I just wonder whether you want to have an opportunity either to reflect on your own time management practices, perhaps look at some of these tools. I'll stick some of the links in the chat for you, but they're also available on our LibGuide. So, oops, sorry, what I'm going to do is stop sharing. And I will just put the link to the time management section of our LibGuide into the chat. Oh, it's come through really huge. Sorry about that. And if you go onto there in the try it out section, there will be a few kind of hints and tips and tools. Let me also put some of the other things into the chat as well. Sorry, because these are coming off PowerPoint slides. The font's really huge. And it's not showing particularly helpfully. But yeah, perhaps have a look at some of those. Goblin tools was the other one that I mentioned, and literally if you just Google Goblin tools, that will come up. So we'll just take 5 minutes. I know that's not ideal. I know you're going to want to spend longer on it, but it does just give you an opportunity, even if you just want to bookmark something, to look at it later.
Hi both. A question for you on the basis that there's a lot of links there and not enough time to go through them all. I am pretty analog in the way that I write. Notebook, pens, I end up using notes markers, not massively dissimilar to that. It's basically color code themes and areas. But the challenge with that is obviously it's analog. And then when you want to extract something or link things together, it's a little difficult. Miro, however we're pronouncing it, I find that too vast in terms of the amount of screen real estate and scrolling left to right. I'm just a little bit of a dinosaur in that sense. I can't necessarily think that way. I need to see the extent of the screen. In the absence of, or without having to buy something like Remarkable or one of those note takers where you can file stuff, is there a platform, a link that you've shown on there that sort of provides that without having to use it as one of a suite of bits of software platforms and so forth that does that?
So I'm not. Do you mean in terms of sort of like digitizing your analog stuff?
Yes, I'm happy to move from analog to digital if it's something that's fairly easy to use. I don't necessarily want to have to buy the hardware.
Yeah,
If there's a
sure.
software alternative, it's just something that allows for easy note taking, categorizing so you can go back and sort of refer and find sort of almost do a thematic analysis of your own notes
Yeah, yeah,
in a certain sense, because you're probably taking, in a book at least, I'm taking them in a fairly linear chronological order, and something that's on page 6 might relate to something on 60, and then you're flicking back and forth to try and find them. Even with those color coded post-its, it's just a smarter way of doing that rather than having to carry multiple notebooks and post-its and so forth. That's what
I
I'm
mean,
looking for.
yeah, I mean, I think in terms of actual note taking, so in terms of like if you're reading academic articles and note taking, then something like Notion is very good for that, and it's very good for linking, like connecting your thoughts in that way. I mean, if you just want something that's more like a notebook but online, but easy to kind of keyword search, then even just something like OneNote, which is part of the Microsoft products, and that's what I use for all my note making at work. You can have hundreds and hundreds of different sections, but it's very easy just to kind of find things again. Like you say, you don't want to be flicking backwards and forwards. You can date stamp everything. So if that's a kind of a really simple way of doing it, because something like Notion takes a little while, I think, to kind of set up and make all your kind of connections. Um, I think the value of things like Miro, or Jamboard is that they work really well for kind of short thoughts, like post-it notes, like you said, if you're flagging things up in that way. So that can be good. And I think even just using Zotero for the notes that you make on books and articles, if they're tied very specifically to that, not so good for free notes perhaps, but you can tag things really well. You can make connections between other things that you've read. It's all keyword searchable. Um, you can link the notes that you make on your PDFs to actually kind of freeform notes that you're making. So the two are kind of sitting side by side. And I think that's kind of one of the few bits of software that does that. And obviously that's freely available. So yeah, I think it's horses for courses in a way. There are different products depending on your particular need. Sometimes it's easy just to pick one and it's kind of slightly imperfect maybe for everything, but it's kind of easy enough that you've just got everything in one place. And that's kind of why, in a way, I've actually ended up just using OneNote quite a lot because it's just one place. It's easy to get to. It's easy to kind of see things up front. But it's perhaps something we can take offline and have a little chat with you, and we can perhaps step through some of these products and just see whether or not they fit your needs. Alberto, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I would say I probably use Notion. Sorry, Zotero a lot more, simply because because I can break it down into different folders. Then I can search inside the folder if I'm working on a particular project or a particular area and have all my PDFs and notes there. But then if I wanted to pop out and then see all the notes I might have had on a particular topic, then I can go into my main library and keyword search, and that will bring out everything that I've taken a note. So exactly like you said, to be able to tag it, write your own free notes underneath basically the note from the PDF can be really helpful, because then when you transfer it over to a Word document, you can then edit your own free note part of that note without having to mess up the reference. So yeah.
Okay, I'm jumping ahead then. You said you were going to cover Zotero a little bit later, so I'll look forward to that. Thanks very much.
Okay, so we'll move on now. But yeah, if anyone's got any specific questions, yeah, like Nicola said, there's way too many links there, but it's just some things that you might not have tried before, or you've heard about and not had time to kind of look into. But what I hope is that some of these things actually save you time. If you find that they're taking up more time, just kind of getting to grips with them, then maybe it's not worth investing in them. But some of these things definitely give you that sense of just feeling a little bit more prepared before you undertake some of the specific tasks. So Alberto, I'll hand over to you.
Right, let me go ahead and bring this up here. So how was that? Can we see the literature review slide? Just wanted to make sure. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so now moving on over to literature review then. And I think this is a really important section when you think about your project, because it's really the section where you're going to start to begin to narrow the scope for your project and bringing out what are some important themes and important areas of your work. But first, I wanted to kind of get a sense of what are some of your thoughts when you think about a literature review? What image comes to your mind when you think about a literature review? And if you could pop maybe some words in the chat, that would be great. Any word or image that comes to your mind when you think of a literature review? Jumbled puzzle, yes. Ooh, cross-examination. That's a new one. It's really good. So, needles in a haystack. That's a really nice one as well. Yeah, and I think this is all really good. Particularly, I've been thinking about it as a type of metaphor, because metaphors have this wonderful way of kind of like shaping our reality and thinking about things in a different perspective. Oh, a mountain with me at the bottom looking up. It's a big stack of books or literature to read. Yes, but yeah, so metaphors are really great for that because they kind of help to basically think about how we are approaching a literature review. So, for example, like for me, I think of literature review as a bit of a type of map with trails. And it's helping me to kind of give the reader an information that they need so that they can understand how I arrived at my argument, my ideas, and at sense the way I'm thinking about the contribution if I were writing about that. So it's really quite nice to think about it in that different sense. So then what is a literature review? And literature reviews are generally described as basically a piece of writing that discusses published information in a particular subject area. And it's in this space here that you're going to summarize, synthesize, unpack, and review your sources. And while this is a very nice general definition that's probably widely accepted, it's important to note that basically conventions about format and expectations of what a literature review is and will do will vary across disciplines, departments, genres, and audiences. So, for example, in a discipline, a literature review for humanities project might be somewhat quite different from the type of literature review that is done in natural sciences or social science section or department between art history and international relations, that they may look quite different. And also thinking about who you're writing for, and this is always really important in terms, are you writing for your advisors? Are you writing for peers in your field or students in the class? So that will also shape basically the expectations of what you need to do for a literature review. So why then do we think about literature reviews? And in their book, Telling a Research Story, Writing a Literature Review, the scholars Feek and Swells, they write a really interesting, nice quote. They say, in my literature review, I tell a research story that leads to and justifies my project. I explain what we know so far, what remains to be discovered or fully explained, and how my project might advance my field. And I think this quote is really quite nice because it describes three key reasons of why we write a literature review. For one, a literature review demonstrates our preparations. They show that, that we've done the due diligence, we've read, we become familiar with the key conversations and the key works in our field. And we're also not just replicating research that's already been done. Also, a literature review helps us to kind of develop and perform a scholarly identity. They demonstrate that, we are becoming a member of our chosen field that we've decided to study, and that we're familiar with these major conversations in the field. And also, lastly, a literature review also helps us to contribute to a conversation by explaining how our project is situated within that field, and how it builds upon other previous research or departs from earlier publications as well. So I think those are the key things. And so what does it do? Basically, it does a couple of different things, I think, in terms of function. A literature review describes the kind of search that was conducted, if we need to kind of show our search strategy. It also summarizes, analyzes, and organizes, again, going back to these three key things, the various responses that we found in the scholarly conversation regarding our question. It also explains why different scholars provide different answers for the same or related questions. So it can account for debates in the field. It can also account for tensions in the literature that we might see popping up. And it also helps us to identify basically what we can add to the conversation. So what goes in a literature review? And I think this is a big question. And one way to think about it, and again, thinking about metaphors and different ways to analogies, you might want to think about it as a dinner party, or maybe as a post-conference party get-together. Who would you invite and why? Or who are the people that basically people seem to kind of be gravitating around in this post-conference party? Where are they situated in the room, in a certain sense? And these are some, you can think of it as well as like, what are some of the key questions that you can ask yourself again? So what are the key works in the field? What are other research has taken place in related areas? What are some of the gaps in the existing knowledge, and why? And again, this goes back to these type of questions that we talked about in the research gap. Is it a question of when the research was conducted, or is it a question because the theory has evolved because of just chronologically in terms of time? Again, what are the main theories that are being explored? And also thinking about terminology can be quite important as well. That might require a bit further definition. So we're using highly contested terms like, culture or left wing or right wing or climate. Basically, what do we mean by that? And it's a great space in your project to kind of unpack some of these meanings there. So a literature, then what does it do? An effective literature review then is going to kind of demonstrate this type of breadth and depth in your reading. And you can see it here in this type of pyramid diagram here. It includes your interpretation of previous research. And I think this is something that I've been repeating. It's like, what is your contribution, your voice, situating yourself in the conversation. And it builds upon a strong foundation of support for your ideas. So are you engaging with some of the primary works in your field? Secondary criticisms that, might be building upon that. And then again, inserting your own voice. So reviewing then the literature, some things that you can do, you want to find and collect scholarly articles relevant to the research topic. You want to also understand major questions that resulted from the selected literature that you decided to pull out, formulate several overriding themes that might be relevant to the topic once you start seeing this type of pattern emerge, compare and contrast contributions of relevant articles within each theme, demonstrate this type of synthesis and critical analysis in your writing, you working through these ideas, and then also improve the quality and integrity of writing through revision. So also it's really important as you start thinking about planning and thinking about this type of progression of your project that you might have to come back to it. So the writing process is hardly ever very linear, that, okay, now I progressed from this section to this section. Sometimes you might find that you need to kind of review this, and also as you revise, new ideas will pop up and you'll have to account for that type of information. So then how do you structure your literature review? And really, it's dependent upon your discipline. And this is where you'll want to go look at your discipline, your department, and see what's expected of a literature review. But often there's a kind of common structure that we've seen. So we have the introduction. It gives a very quick idea of the topic of the literature review, such as the central theme or the organizational pattern that we're going to see. And this is where you're going to tell your reader what subject area you'll be covering. Then you'll use the type of body paragraphs to summarize, analyze, and sometimes critique some of the information. And you can do this basically through either chronological examination, thematically, methodologically, or by type of publication or trend. And then in the conclusions, this is where you're going to discuss pretty much what you've done from reviewing the literature, like what you've drawn from there, how might the discussion proceed there. And so we've got this large overview. So now we'll actually get into the literature searching, and Laura, I think, will take over from here.
That's great. Thanks, Alberto. I will just present in Teams.
Yeah, I think it might let you take over.
Nearly, but not quite. Where are we? There we go. Okay, hopefully you've got the magnifying glass. Brilliant. Okay, so, excuse me, hang on. As Alberto said, yeah, so there's a lot of kind of mental preparation before you actually begin that literature searching. And it kind of comes back, as we always say, to this kind of purpose. You know, what is it you're doing this for? It's not just to kind of have 100 things in your bibliography at the end of the day. It's for a particular purpose. There are particular themes you're going to need to develop. There might be some readings where you're just finding it, well, there's so much on this. And then there's other areas that I know I'm going to have to focus on. This has been flagged up by my supervisor. They really want me to have this. I just haven't got enough material in this area. So having real purpose. And if you keep kind of finding things that are really similar, being brave enough to ditch them and say, no, I know this already. I don't need any more information about this. They might be a key author. I might just want to reference a couple of words that they say just to kind of check that I've got their thesis correct. But I don't need to spend hours delving into a particular topic if I'm already feeling quite comfortable there. So in terms of the stages of searching, like I said, you're going to have to really identify that particular need that you've got. What is it that I'm trying to find today? And sometimes the danger is just wanting to kind of find everything that's on your topic. And as you well know, you're going to have to do a series of different literature searches. You might be really lucky. There might be some big kind of broad papers or books out there that cover the kind of similar topic that you're interested in. But chances are actually you're going to have really kind of specific things you want to find. So you need to kind of work out what it is that you need. Then you need to develop that search strategy. And just like the writing process, as Albert said, this is a really iterative process. So this is something that's constantly evolving, again, depending on the length of your project, your dissertation or thesis. There are those kind of proactive ways of going out there and trying to see what's out there, but then there's also slightly more reactive ways, finding out what's already been written, looking at citations, and then we need to manage those results. So we need to have really good storage systems in place, and you need to have those in place right now before you even start finding things, so that when you find something useful, like we said, you've got somewhere to put it. It might be something you haven't got time to read immediately. How are you going to manage those? How are you going to store all those resources that you find so that you can easily go back to them at the drop of a hat? And then we will just talk a little bit about access as well, because often we get a lot of questions about how do I find certain resources. So yeah, I think a large part of defining your information need is having really good research questions at the start and being able to break them down and break them down and break them down. And actually, I had a student who came to see me yesterday, and they had a question. They wanted to find loads of data on something. And my first question to them was, are you just trying to find data on this, you know, kind of last year, the last 5 years, the last decade? Their study was building on another study that had been done. So is it everything that's been published since then? And I, oh, that's a really good question. I hadn't thought about that. So that is absolutely valid, that you may not have kind of come across, kind of had those thoughts just yet, but it is something you really need to think about. Are you trying to find everything that's ever been written? Because maybe if this is your methodology, this might be a really large part of your research. That might be your aim, to do a systematic review, and that's a completely different thing. We can look at that separately one-to-one. Or are you trying to target, you know, particular periods of writing? Are you trying to discard certain things? Are you looking from particular geographical regions? Are you trying to kind of broaden different voices in your reading? Is that kind of a particular thing that you're going to bring to your research project? So thinking about all those things before we just, again, jump in head first. So in terms of identifying a few search terms, this is a really broad question. So this kind of undermines what I've just been saying. You probably wouldn't come in with something really broad like that. But unlike most search engines, a lot of our academic databases do require you to be quite specific in the way that you search for things, to really draw out those kind of keywords, to combine them very strategically. And we can, again, kind of compare some of those research databases a little bit. But if we were going to pull this out, these might be some of the big search terms that we would be looking for. One of the big issues when you're reading, as you will find, is that people have framed things differently. Now, this might be, again, depending on their kind of educational background. It might be a geographical thing. There might just be different terms that are used in different spaces, but also over time, terminology will have changed and adapted. New terminology would have come in as well. So just try and think all about different spellings, abbreviations that might be out there. If they've got technical language, really making sure you explore that and feel really comfortable with it if you're using it as some of your search terms. But go to town a little bit. Don't just whack in the first questions that the first keywords that you've written down in your research questions. Map it all out first. Do a little bit of brainstorming to really think, okay, this is my perspective, this is where I'm coming from, but how have other people framed it? And this is, again, where it becomes really iterative, because as you begin to read, you'll spot different search terms, things that are coming up. You'll spot these patterns. You might find that your particular search term is just bringing in too much irrelevant material, and then you have to ditch it. And as I've said already, keep records of all of this. This is part of your methodology. This is really important. Again, when you come to write up the literature review section, it helps situate kind of, why was I doing that? Why was I exploring that? Why did I change tack on that? Why haven't I got much material on this particular thing? Remembering that we can refine our searches. So if we get too much material, it's possibly because our terms are too wide, they're too broad, they're too generic. We can think about ways of, phrase searching would be an obvious thing that we do with that, combining search terms, excluding terms that aren't relevant. But quite often we also don't get enough. People come back, they've got 5 things, there must be more research out there. And again, this might be that we're using the wrong terms. If we're using academic databases, they're getting a little bit better, a little bit more intuitive, a bit more like Google, but quite often they still are actually requiring you to put in search terms in a quite technical way, to put a wildcard in where there's different spellings, or to search for word stems because it's not clever enough necessarily to look for all different versions of that word. How you keep track of it is completely up to you, but a really basic search grid will do the job. So thinking about your key terms and putting those down that first column there, and then thinking about synonyms and filling in to the right on the rows there. So this would be a really simple one here, but this would be the search string that had come out of it. I'm looking for social or society, community, communal, impacts or outcomes or effects. I don't really mind what the word is, of nuclear, power or energy. You might start finding that things about weaponry is coming up, and that might be something you want to exclude. So it's a really basic way, though, of just indicating that you can have quite a significant search string from what appears to be quite a straightforward question. Then the question is, where do you start searching? Again, this is part of you defining your particular information need. Do you kind of care what sort of resource it is? Maybe to begin with you don't. You just kind of want to see what's out there. It might be that you, to begin with, really don't know what the material is, so you might want to focus on review articles. And lots of the databases that are subscribed to by university libraries are really good at focusing down on different types of resource, whereas something like Google Scholar, it's got the breadth, but the problem is you just get utterly bombarded. It might be that there's things that we subscribe to, and that's fantastic. Obviously, Cambridge University Libraries has a huge repertoire of material available to you out there. But even when you are on something like Google Scholar, there's always something that comes up that we don't have access to. You hit a paywall. I get lots and lots of emails from people saying, I found this article or this book. How do I get access? And it's because we don't pay for it. So there might be open access versions. There might be versions in repositories that are kind of preprint versions where they're just kind of in a Word document, so they don't have any of the typesetting. But there's lots and lots of open access databases out there to help you drill down. It might be that you're looking specifically for grey material or for reports. Again, lots of specific databases that can help you target in that way. To begin with, you might just want citations. You might just want to know what's out there. You might actually want to read the material and make sure that you're using a full text database for that. And is it primary or secondary searching that you're doing as well? So already we saw in those kind of outlines of people's imagined dissertations that you might have some archival research. So there are particular databases that you can use for that. I've put these two links on this slide. I won't follow through on them now, but I'm quite often amazed how few people know about the A to Z database listing. So you can search for a known database like Web of Science or JSTOR or Scopus, British Humanities Index, International Bibliography of Social Sciences. But also you can limit things by a type of resource. If you're looking specifically for images or for data, or if you're looking for something in your subject area, you can play around with it in that way. Sorry, Aggie, just reading your question. Oh, grey literature. So this is things that often are out there and sort of published by the institution that has produced it. So it might be an annual report, for example. It might be legislation that's come out from the government, sort of official publications, those sorts of things are often called grey literature, but less so books and journal articles that have come through at kind of official publishing routes. These are things that can be produced, but you then have to kind of query the legitimacy of it, whether or not it's been peer reviewed in any way. It's often it's a little bit more messy. Would white papers fall into this category? In terms of kind of governmental ones, Nico, do you mean? Yeah, so it can do. I mean, I think official publications is a kind of really broad term that does encompass some grey literature. A lot of grey literature might come out of charities, non-governmental organisations, those sorts of organisations as well. Feel free to unmute if you want to. And it's easy
that is what I was wondering about. Stuff written by charities, organisations, industry bodies, and so forth. But yeah, thanks. I'm guessing anything that's not sort of academic in terms of it being peer reviewed, proofread, that kind of thing would fall into the grey literature category.
I think in my definition, and it may be that someone else on the call's got a different definition, but yes, I think it is just thinking about kind of quality control, and you're just having to apply a little bit more kind of critical reading when you're approaching these things, because they've probably been written with a really particular purpose, a particular frame in mind. They might have been sponsored by a particular organization. In theory, yeah, they're going to be less they're just few less peer review would have been carried out on it. Sorry, Alberto, you've
Yeah, I think also, like, for example, if we were to look at dissertations or theses that we were also reading, that would also fall under grey literature as well, because it hasn't necessarily gone through that peer review process of an academic journal or a publication that to kind of get through that, even though it's been accepted through a university. So yeah, that's another thing to kind of keep in mind as well.
Oh, that's a good tip. Thanks.
Yeah, and actually that, just to point back to the A to Z database listing and the physical and digital collections, they're really useful if you do want to track down other theses that have been written in your particular field, just to kind of find out, if someone else has done the work before you, then there's no point you slogging through trying to find resources if you can kind of make use of some of the research that they've done. Okay, that's useful, Aggie. Thanks. Yeah, I'll probably digest that in a sec and get back to you if there's anything else I can add in there. Okay, so we talked already, about this idea of broadening and limiting our searches, and I think again, a lot of the academic databases that we have give you huge opportunities to narrow down your search and to limit it to the particular things that you need. And this is really helpful if you are in that process of writing up and you think, actually, I just need a really couple of I need a couple of references here that are from at least 20 years ago. I just need a little bit of back history. I've been doing loads of current reading, or vice versa, that actually I just need things that have been published in the last year. And if you're doing a PhD, then obviously that is really, really important that you can keep all your research up to date. You might have conducted a review on a couple of search terms 2 years previously, and something really critical might have been published in the last 2 years. So think about using kind of date ranges. Are there particular publications, like we said, country of origin? Do you want to kind of broaden the scope of your research and exclude stuff that's coming from the UK and the US and bring in different voices to your research? Does it matter whether or not it's been funded by someone? Sometimes that's useful, sometimes not. So always use advanced search options when you are, even if you're using Google Scholar, but particularly if you're on some of these academic databases. So just a couple of screenshots to save me jumping out the presentation, but by conducting a search here within Web of Science, and if you haven't used Web of Science, it isn't just science, so if you're in the humanities, social sciences, do have a look as well. It will highlight your search terms, so you can begin to kind of see the relevance of what you're looking at, and then you can see down the left hand side, this is where there's a nice list of limiting filters, so you can start playing around with the results that you've got. So 688 be an awful lot to go through just by eye. So there might be other ways you can parcel it up. Even if you want to go through them all in the end, again, like we said, make it smart, make it manageable just for working with it on a particular day. And I've expanded it there. You can see if I just wanted a few review articles to get the kind of background on this topic, they might be where I would focus my energy. I'm beginning to see kind of key authors coming up, and that might be helpful to direct my future searches. Type of categories, there might be subject areas that I just don't feel are relevant that I want to exclude. And you can really drill down as well, just expanding them out here. If I wanted to exclude some search results, or again, I might start to see patterns developing and I might need to think, okay, I'm going to focus in on some journals in this particular field that doesn't actually align with me too interestingly. And that's interesting. Why is that? That might take your research in a completely new direction. And by publication title, you might then see key publications, and you might just want to spend some time browsing through their tables of contents to find things where the keywords don't immediately jump out with you, but that they're kind of on topic as well, especially if there's kind of niche journals you just haven't come across before. And this leads quite nicely onto the idea of citation searching. Keyword searching is brilliant. It's great. It gives you you're in control of it, but it can also be horrible and messy. And more often than not, you either don't find anything or you find way too much. So using the research that's gone before you is really, really important. So citation searching is finding an article that really fits with your topic and then looking at the bibliography. What did they use to formulate their argument? You might have read some of this stuff already, which is fantastic. It might be completely new to you, and that is perhaps going to raise a few questions. Okay, their argument's really close to mine. Why have I not come across this? Again, you can then start thinking, okay, their keywords are different. This is focusing on a particular case study I hadn't even thought about. You can start bringing things in that way. So there's the bibliography, the stuff that they have used to form their argument. Then there's kind of the future. If something was published in 2008, who, since this article has been published, has read it and cited it as well? So who has used this as the foundation for their arguments as well? So looking forwards and looking backwards, all based on a kind of key critical article. And more often than not, that's what happens. People come to us and say, I'm only finding a few things that are relevant. That's great. You can then use those and look at what they've cited and who has cited them since then. One thing I do want to just flag with you is the size of the index that you're using. So if you were using Google Scholar and we were doing a particular search, so here's my keyword search that I've conducted, 154,000 results. Yeah, I'll just wade through those really quickly. This is where citation searching might come in handy. So I found a really interesting article, Opportunities and Challenges within Urban Health and Sustainable Development. And you can see it's given me a list of articles that have cited it since it has been published. If I do the same within Web of Science, you can see I only get 5 results. So that's 18 versus 5. That's because not as many things are indexed within Web of Science. That has really quite a high threshold in terms of quality peer-reviewed journal literature. Whereas, as we've said already, something like Google Scholar will have books in there, there'll be theses, there will be some of this grey literature, there'll be reports, things that it deems to be academic, but there may not be the quality control on that. So this is why it's worth using a variety of different tools when you're doing your literature search and not relying too heavily on one particular angle. So it might be that you get more through Google Scholar, but it might be that things that you read through Web of Science are kind of more the sort of stuff that you're looking for. Oh, fantastic. Lit maps. Actually, Albert, is that something you've used, isn't it? Lit maps.
Yeah, I've had a bit of practice on it. Yeah, and I think it can be really good, especially if you're trying to say literature map. I mean, that's one of these things of helping you to kind of see that chain searching of, you get a paper, you pop it in there, and then you see who might have used it or how it's related. Now, one thing that I think when we move on to stuff like Lit Maps, Research Rabbit, and all these type of other AI-powered basically search tools, is that you have to consider also like where are they getting their sources. So many of those use Semantic Scholar as a database in which to cite their source. And one thing about Semantic Scholar is it's great, but it's also sometimes very limited in terms of like the subject areas or the way it categorizes papers. A lot of it comes as uncategorized. So when you see that there might not be something there, it's be careful that it's not maybe a gap in the literature, but it's just a gap in that semantic scholar database. And that's why I think, as Laura said, it's really important to have a play around with different types of databases and have different ways of searching. But yeah, litmaps can be really great, especially if you want to see the graphs and the connections.
Brilliant. Thanks for bringing that in, Nikhil. That's super. Yep. So as I've said, again, for me, like you can tell I'm a kind of librarian as well at record keeping, but it's about keeping track of what you found. So like we said, it's iterative. So keep a little journal. You know, I use these search terms a day. This is how many results I got. These are the databases I used. I wasn't really satisfied, so I brought in this new term, or I read this paper and it introduced me to this, or I started looking at the keywords that have been provided. You know, when people publish a journal article, often you've got to provide 5 keywords. They seem to be coalescing around these particular themes. Just write it all down. It'll just help, because it's so overwhelming, the process, you will forget. And then when you come to write up your literature search, it hopefully will give you a little bit of structure, or even just background reassurance of kind of why you're doing what you are. There's also other ways you can do it. So literature synthesis matrix, and also a search grid. So let's have a look at some of the ways that we can keep these records. Scopus is slightly more scientifically biased, but you will find arts, humanities and social science in there as well. And it has a really nice feature for exporting all the things that you find. So you can conduct a keyword search, and then you can select everything that you found, export it to an Excel spreadsheet like this. And as you can see, the column that I've highlighted has the abstracts in. So if I just sort of change the formatting a little bit, I can expand that. And that's a really great way for moving through 600 odd articles really quickly. You don't have to click into each one, read the abstract, make a judgment. You've got it all there. You can scroll through, and then you could perhaps, you know, just quickly highlight, okay, these are the kind of 10 key ones I want to follow up first. There's even a column, as you can see on the right hand side here, for the keywords that they're using. Again, you could perhaps do a little bit of work in Excel just to kind of just keyword search it really simply and find, oh, I've got 37 instances of this particular keyword. That's something I'm going to stick with. Or scrolling through, this thing's come through only once, you know, why is that? So getting that overview, that mapping, is really nice if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed by some of the resources that you're finding. Of course, not every database does this, so you might want to build your own spreadsheet to give you that kind of overview, to export a bit of data that way. Another way, yeah, would just be to do it manually and to start thinking, okay, I don't need to see all the data, but what I do want to do is start drawing out some of the key themes. And this might be before you even read it. This might just be copying and pasting bits and bobs from people's abstracts, or it might be a way of note-taking as well. So having these key themes that are coming up on that left-hand side in that first column. And then for every article that I read, I really want to kind of draw out what's their definition, because that's going to be a large part of my literature review. Is going to be the way that people define personal learning environments. And I just know then that I've got the same data from every single article I'm reading. There'll be loads of other free notes, because obviously people don't write in exactly the same way, but I definitely want that. And I definitely want to focus in on kind of their kind of definitions, or the way that they're explaining pedagogy as well. It also means it helps when you realize you haven't got enough reading on a particular theme. So, you know, if I was looking for issues of pedagogy and I just had like 2 people had mentioned it, I'd really need to start doing more literature searching in that field. Now, we did just want to talk a bit about AI. Alberto, do you want to step in here?
Sorry, yeah, I was trying to find the mic. So yeah, in terms of AI, yes, I mean, it's a big conversation piece of the day at the moment, in terms of basically it being interactive with education and being used for academic purposes and things like that. And it can open up a lot of possibilities. And I think, as for example, Nikhil mentioned bitmaps, it's powered by AI. It has much more of this type of natural language, basically searching, as opposed to the keyword searching. But it can be really important to think about basically the purpose of the tool and why you're using it. And I think one way, especially if you're going to interact with large language models like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, for example, it can be really important in terms of the importance of prompting. Like, what are you putting in? What are you looking for? And how are you putting it in to try to get the best optimal result? So one way that basically framework that's out there that seems to be really good is the CLEAR framework. It's by Leo Lowe, and he talks about prompt engineering. He breaks it down into the various steps. So you make sure that it's concise, logical, explicit, adaptive, and reflective. And also to be aware of false citations. And I know that from the early days in 2022, when basically you had these fabrications, and we dealt with a couple of them. We had some since like, I can't find this article. And after a couple of questioning and saying, okay, where did you get this information from? Because we couldn't find it either. It's like, oh, I used ChatGPT. So it's gotten better, but still every now and then it will pop up basically a citation that is just not there. It's just made it up. And part of the reason is because even though it's kind of scraped the internet and it's been updated, it still works very much like a large language model in terms of the predictability of basically what it's expected to put out there. So I said it could be useful for a summary of the literature as well. So if you're able to query it and it does have access, but it won't be for answering a type of specific question in the sense of the type of academic question and the critical analysis that you'll be expected to kind of produce for your work. Yeah. And I think Laura, you ran this nice example here on your, would you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so just kind of, as you can see, just asking it a question, are there any books that could provide insights into sustainable development, urban planning? So kind of sticking with my previous research question. And here are some of the recommendations that it comes up with. And yeah, some of those are going to be useful, some of them are valuable. As you can see, it's just giving me a kind of one-line suggestion as to what might be helpful, but that's then going to be up to me to go out there to read it. It might discount something, but then it might discount something wrong. So I think in terms of the risks that we're taking with it, it could be a helpful tool, and certainly if you get stuck, why not try it? But I also think at the same time, there's no replacement for going out there and doing the searches yourself. Okay, so naturally, as I said, before you even start your literature searching, you want to have kind of mechanisms in place for capturing your references. Just like, have I read this? What are the bibliographic details? Really basic stuff. We had a master's student who last summer had to come and spend 3 days literally physically running around Cambridge trying to track down citations that they had taken because they hadn't taken them fully. They didn't have page numbers. They had some really great notes. They're like, I think it comes from this book, but I'm not totally sure. Some of the books, they were in all different libraries. We were phoning up other college libraries where there was the only copy that was available because our copy was on loan. It was like 3 crazy days because actually they didn't have these systems in place to begin with. And we all make mistakes. We all by accident forget to write things down. I know that happens, but this was quite a systemic problem, I think. So I will use that as my cautionary tale for today. Just decide how you're going to do it. Like we said, it could be on OneNote, it could be in a really nicely indexed notebook. And if you are really keen on using notebooks, just make sure that you save the first few pages and keep it as an index or, a kind of contents page. So number all your pages in your notebook and then just keep really good notes at the start and say, page 3 is about this, page 15 is on this. You can physically then make connections. You can use color coding. There's all sorts of ways you can still use hard copy. It doesn't have to be online, but I think the benefits of being able to keyword search and organize and tag are really, really valuable. So this is, a screenshot from my OneNote showing you all the different folders I have, the way that I can find things again. I can cut and paste images in really, really nicely, do screenshots. It gives me a little bit more flexibility. This is a screenshot from Zotero, and that can show you how you can highlight things within a PDF and they just appear in your notes. You can also type your own notes in. You can draw boxes around sections and it will do like a mini screenshot from the PDF. So it's kind of multimedia way of taking notes as well. It's not just kind of a single form for doing that. So decide how you're going to take your notes. Define your questions like we said, why are you reading it, what do you want to get from it. When you've got that thing from it, if that's a really short citation, if it's an overview, move on, being really strict with yourself because you're going to have a lot to read. Constantly, even just like a single line after you finish reading something, how does this fit with what I know? That like critical reflection thing. We've talked about this in the workshop that we did last term, but a mini summary at the end, like what have I learned from this? How does it move on my thinking? How does it connect with other things? So that when you come to write up your literature review, you've got these little mini sections, you've got these sentences that you can start to bring in. They're your own writing, you know, you're not copying and pasting. They can begin to form the basis of an argument for you. And then that little pause, right, what do I want to read next? This has moved my thinking on in this way, or it hasn't. You know, I thought it was going to do that and it didn't, so I need something else to fill that gap. Or if it has moved it on, what are my new branches? So constantly reevaluating at every single stage. Yeah, and I said, think about your future self. Be kind to yourself. Like, you know, praisey things, reflect on things, just get it all down. Don't assume you're going to be in the same research place that you are now. Okay, sorry, I know we're utterly bombarding you with information here, and this is why we record these. And this is also, you know, part of the reason for running these is to throw loads of stuff out there and to give you a chance to kind of come back to us on a one-to-one basis and say, right, you mentioned that tool. Can we spend like 20 minutes looking at it? Or just send me an email, you know, ask me a question and we can get back to you. So these are kind of deliberately dense, like rich fruitcakes, these sessions, with bits to unpick. But one other thing I did just want to mention is the idea of kind of keeping up to date. Less of an issue possibly if you're doing a master's dissertation, but definitely an issue if you're doing a PhD. And that is, yeah, how do you keep up to date? How do you find out about new research? You don't want to spend ages doing your literature search, which people traditionally do at the start of the process, for it to become out of date. And then you think, I'm going to have to do that whole thing again now. So you can set up alerts. A lot of the databases will enable you to do this. Google Scholar, Web of Science, Scopus, lots and lots of them will let you do this. Put in your search terms, keep them relatively broad, so that you're not restricting yourself too much. And then when something new is published that meets those particular search terms, you'll just get dropped an email. So here's an example here from Scopus. As you can see, it was really, really broad, but like the impact of kelp forests on climate change. Something new comes out, I can then follow it up, or I can just delete if it doesn't look useful. Other ways of keeping up to date and just finding out what's being published in your field, like we said, you might find that there are key journal titles that are out there. Anyone who's been researching for a while might remember things like TikToks, which were tables of contents that got used to be sent to you through RSS feeds. Things are much nicer these days. And browsing is a really, really nice example of that. It's very visual. You can highlight particular journals, you put them on your little bookshelf, and then it will update you when a new table of contents comes in. So you can just see what's being published in your field all the time. And that's nice if it doesn't exactly meet your search terms. And then my final word, I know we're reaching the end of our time slot, is about access. I get huge numbers of emails from people saying, I found this, how do I get access? And then I'll go on iDiscover and find straight away we've got access. I don't mind being asked the question, I'm here to help. But for that person, if they email me at 11:30, you know, the night before, and I've got a meeting first thing, I don't get round to answering it. It could be, you know, 12 hours, 24 hours later before I can get back to someone. And that's time that that person might have lost if they just wanted to quickly find something and see if it was going to be useful. So please do use iDiscover. Pretty much all our journal articles are indexed in there, as well as all the books and ebooks that we have access to. I've just highlighted that radio button at the top that's above the main search box that allows you just to search for online content if you're not physically in a library when you're looking for things. Yeah, if you can't find it and you think we should have access, obviously do email me. This isn't to say don't email me, but I just want to remind people about it so they can get things as soon as they need them. There are lots of ways, and this is all on our literature searching tab on our LibGuide, to remind you about library links to Google Scholar. So this will prompt you to access things through Cambridge University Library. So if you find something on Google Scholar, set up library links, it will give you the link straight to that PDF. So you don't have to again go and search iDiscover, find out whether or not we subscribe to something. Lean Library and Unpaywall are two little bookmarklets, little browser extensions that you can add. And again, if you're browsing the internet and we subscribe to something, you'll get a little pop-up or say, oh, we subscribe to this. Or it might say, we don't subscribe to this, but similar titles that we found are this, this, and this. I think the open access issue is really important as well. And if you're finding that you are working on in areas that we don't have a lot of subscribed material to, there are specific databases that you can use in that field. If we don't have a copy, if it's something possibly. It's been published in other countries, written in another language. You just find that there isn't anything that we've got that we can get. It might be a historic resource that just hasn't been digitized. Do make use of the document delivery service. If it's an electronic resource, often there can be a 24-hour turnaround, so we can get the article to you really, really quickly. It might be, I don't know, University of Leicester subscribes and we don't for some particular reason. It might also be that there's a book that's only available in a library in Rome, and we can get that kind of sent to you as well. So lots and lots of ways to get hold of materials. So don't be disheartened if you're working in a field where there doesn't seem to be stuff that's just readily available online. I've also flagged up JISC Library Hub Discover. This is all the research libraries in the UK. So if you are traveling around, if you're going to other archives and you want to use somebody else's library, you can see what materials they've got, and it might be that they have specialist collections that we don't. Okay, like we said, we've thrown loads of stuff at you. If we pause here and ask if there are any questions about what we've said already, we know that some of you already have quite developed reference management systems in place, so we won't do this for everyone. So we'll answer questions now on the whole presentation. If you then want to leave, that's absolutely fine. If you'd like to stay for a demonstration of Zotero, then we are happy to do that as well. So yeah, any questions, pop them in the chat or feel free to unmute. Or if there's questions that you don't want to ask in front of everyone, then please obviously just drop us an email.
No questions, but thanks for going through that. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. As I said, yeah, it's a little bit like, because it's dealing with dissertation, it's the entire research process in one workshop, so it is always a little bit speedy. But there is time, yeah, to go through those tabs on the LibGuide independently, work through them. Depending on the stage that you're at, we can then, focus in on a one-to-one on any of those tools that we've mentioned.
I'll also pop in from our LibGuide the reference management tab, which has Zotero just in case you need to leave or you want to come back to this later. We also have the Zotero how-to videos there, so if you want to come back and check that later, that's completely fine as well.
Okay, it doesn't seem like there's any burning questions at the moment. So yeah, if you need to go, obviously we said we'd be here for an hour and a half. That's completely understandable, but I'll hand it over to Alberto now for just a quick overview of some of the benefits of using reference management software.
Yes, so reference management software, I think it's really important because basically you need to, we've been talking about through in this workshop, the importance of actually keeping track of the process and being involved in the process and making sure that you don't lose your way. Really keeping track of your references is really important and being able to cite them is really important. And many times we've had students that come, it's like, yeah, I've heard about Zotero or I've heard about reference management. I heard it can help me with my references. Can we do this now? And they're pretty much at the end. And then to go back and put in all those references will take almost as much time rather than actually just them creating the reference themselves. So if you're at the beginning of this process, it's really important to think about it. And the great thing about reference management software is at least Zotero and Mendeley, they're free. You can make an account, and which means then you can access it across different computers. There's, in terms of storage wise, basically, if you get just a desktop version, it has as much memory as basically your desktop will have. The only bad thing is then if you can't access it on a different computer. So some things to kind of think in mind. But I know in terms of Zotero, it's a very low price for, I think, expanded basically storage capacity. I haven't used my storage capacity yet, and that's because I downloaded a lot of PDFs. So I will just get right into it, and then with the time that we have. Let me just drop in the Zotero link, just in case, that way you have it there. So that is the link to Zotero, and let me share my screen. So I tried to have it all pre-set up. So yes, that's Zotero. Let me see, there we go. So we've got Zotero there. When you open it, once you download it, basically you'll have a couple of different things. So you'll have your library here on the left-hand side, basically, and the library, think of it as your entire repository of everything that you've downloaded in there. So you can have a linked view through mine. You can see I've done quite a lot of stuff in terms of downloading. I've organized it so I can see the title, I can see the creator right here, the year, and then this little tab here shows me if I have an attachment, and this can be a PDF, it can be a snapshot of a website, things like that. Now, the nice thing, as I was saying about Zotero, is that you can then organize it according to different types of projects by using subfolders here. So you can see in this folder here, I have AI. I have plenty of subfolders there that I can organize. And what I do is basically I have general works on AI, AI in reading, AI in writing. And so if I were to think about in terms of organizing a project that I wanted to write about, I could then organize it into different sections, or if I'm writing a dissertation, different chapters from a dissertation, and have all my work kind of localized there. The great thing about basically Zotero as well is it acts as a PDF reader here. So if you zoom down there, you can then open up the PDF. It allows you to basically highlight here. You can highlight in different colors. That is important if you're more color-coded like I am as well. It's just been updated, so I'm still learning the new things. But you can hover, and then you don't have to necessarily go back and forth between the references or the works cited. You can actually see the works cited here. You can see one highlight that I've done here. You can also add item notes. And I think this is really important because then it tells you basically where you've gotten it from. If you want to then basically update, maybe have your own ideas to this, to your notes, you can add that in here in the item note as well. And basically that will save it. The nice thing you can do is you can also add tags to it. So the tags will be created by the metadata that's come across when you download it. You can also add your own tags here, so if you wanted to. So I have a color code scheme between I need to read and I haven't read. So if I put need to read and enter, and you can see it's got a color code. So if I go back to basically my main library, I've got the color code there. So that the way it visually prompts me, it's like, okay, this is something I may need to read. So now once you have it downloaded, it integrates really, really nicely into Word. Okay. So you'll see that when you download it, you have the Word tab, the Zotero tab there. It allows you to create a bibliography. So the big thing I often like is basically we can collect this one, this one, this one, and this one. And if I just want a quick bibliography, I can create bibliography from items. It pops up. It gives you the different types of citation styles here. I'll use a very common APA 7. I want to copy it to my clipboard. Press OK. And it gives you a nice bibliography really quite quickly. The other nice feature is you can do a write and cite. So, and let's say I want to add edit a citation. Again, it will pop up asking me to look at the citation style. That's okay. And let's see. Let us do, it pops up there. And then I can just add my bibliography. So we've got sentence 1, 2, add another one. And notice what it did. It goes basically updating the works cited page. So this is a really great way. That way you're making sure that everything you're engaging with and putting into your writing basically gets cited there. Going back to the notes section, so that note that I put in, if I want to enter a note, then I would just insert a note here. And that's there. And notice that it gives, let me just, the part that was cited, and it also gives my own ideas that were put into that note. Now, the nice thing about this is basically it helps me to capture my ideas at the time as I was reading. It allows me, in certain sense, to give a type of zero draft, basically, of my own writing, my own thoughts at that point. And it's also, I can also basically update this without affecting the actual citation. So that's really quite nice as well. The other great thing about Zotero is that you also have a little plugin here that you can use. It goes changing according to basically the resource here. So if I were looking at an article of we were to go view journal. Yeah, let's go to that one. Go to so notice it's changed here. Now, this might not come across the first time because Zotero, you have to accept the terms and conditions, but it's going to chapter 1. Oh, it's great. Good. And so Mary Shirley's Frankenstein at 200. We were able to download it. It's given us the type of resource it is, journal title, authors, all the bibliographic information that we need for a reference source. And it has also downloaded the PDF. So that then we can start taking our notes in here, engaging and reading online. And as I said, it's pretty much given me all in one place. So it's a great way to kind of go throughout the entire research process in terms of like the note-taking, gathering, keeping track of your resources, and then also creating the references with it all in one place. And the fact that it's free, it's open resource. When you leave Cambridge, you can take it with you. So that way you don't have to worry about changing from one type of reference management basically to another. So less stress at the end. So yeah, if you have any questions, I really love this. I'm really evangelical about it just because it helped me with my research so much. And I'm happy to have a one-on-one with you. Yeah, and that's time compared to All right, any
Brilliant.
questions?
Yeah, thanks for demonstrating all that, Alberto. Yeah, and with its new shiny look as well. It seems to be
dark
even
mode.
more intuitive, I think, actually, than it was before, which is great.
So should I perhaps maybe then stop the recording now and then?
Yeah, stop recording.
And
that's great.
Thank you all for sharing your Saturday morning with Laura and me. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Yep, so I will stop now.